Okay, so welcome everybody to the 8th part of the Breakfast webinar series. My name is Iain Stevenson. I work in the asset management team at Thames Water. My background is with clean water modelling, which I still do a bit of, but do a bit more strategic network development now. So yeah, today's topic is understanding, promotion and application of health and safety. This is Competency C2. You probably know the format by now. We'll just run through it. So we'll introduce the competency, go through the key questions, which is quite important for this one, I think. Some example responses. I've changed it a little bit this week, so I think this is a bit more of a personal response, but there are some examples. And then activities for this week and today, and then looking at cross-reference into other accreditations you might be applying for. So yeah, as I said, we're on C2 this week. Just laid out the C competencies for you here. It's quite useful to see. So the first one was about resources. This one is about health and safety. Third one's about sustainability, and fourth one is about quality assurance. So C2, this is the competency as it's laid out. You will be expected to demonstrate your implementation of relevant health and safety policy and legislation, including but not limited to organisation, health and safety policy, Health and Safety at Work Act, confined spaces, CDM 2017, and understanding promotion of safe practices for all stakeholders. You are expected to demonstrate that there are clear processes in place to investigate and record accidents, promoting a preventative approach to health and safety. So it gives you quite a lot of information there. Like we'll go through it a little bit. But it gives you some definite things to hit on this competency. There's also some key questions to this. So I've laid these out a little bit differently. What are they? What do you do, and what are you? So, what are the key health and safety legislation relevant to your work? This is the thing it asked you right at the top, and we'll go into the answer a little bit in a couple of minutes. The promotion. So, procedure to record and investigate near misses. Your responsibilities to you and others. And it asks you, how do you keep up to date with health and safety requirements? How do you ensure that these requirements are planned and implemented in your work? How do you ensure what yours and others' responsibilities are, or how do you fulfill them? How do you deal with an unsafe act? How do you encourage others to apply health and safety standards? And how do you apply safe systems at work? Also ask you at the end, are you an engineer and are you aware of CDM? So normally we run through 4 or 5 examples. So I have thrown some examples in there, but I've kind of broken it down to a few areas. So I think this competency is a little bit more personal. So just throwing out some examples. Other people's examples aren't quite relevant. I have put some in, but really talking about areas to think about. So they are, what's the legislation? What does your company do? Obviously, health and safety in an office. Lots of people are office-based and now home-based. But so talk a little bit about that. Obviously, going to site and field work, recent changes to the area of health and safety that you can include, and just running back to the specific questions here that I think you need to hit on this competency. So the first thing it asks you, what is the key health and safety legislation at work? You don't need a very long-winded answer to this, just a paragraph to explain what's the key legislation? And I've just given an example here. The key legislation is the Health and Safety at Work Act, and it even mentioned it in the competency. So this lays out the basics of your business or any business in the UK and what their health and safety responsibilities are. So you can go and read that on the Health and Safety Executive website. It also sets out the general duties for any business. The responsibilities that employers have to employees and members of the public, what employees have to themselves and each other, and also what self-employed people have to themselves and others. So it's not always down to the company. There is quite a lot of responsibility on the individual. So that lays all that out, and it's a very important piece of legislation that also consolidated lots of health and safety legislation into one place. And obviously that's been updated over the years. So you can go and read about that. And as I said, you can go and you see this on the Health and Safety Executive website. And yeah, I would say that's the best place to look at for legislation. So your company, yeah, you have to respond about health and safety. And it does ask you what your company policy is. So I can't say what everyone's company policy is in this example, but yeah, your company will have a health and safety policy, and it will have a dedicated place on the website. So you should go and read it, and that will tell you about what your company's policy is, and it will be probably based on the Health and Safety at Work Act. Put a little mention of slogans in here. You don't have to put your company slogan in, but I think it's quite useful. They are there to break down health and safety policy into a memorable one-liner. So this is Thames, and it lays it out quite nicely. It says zero harm, zero incident, zero compromise about health and safety, and I think it quite clearly captures what the company's ethos is. So I've thrown in some examples below. Workplaces become extremely safe places to work, successfully preventing physical injury and minimizing associated risks. Companies on the whole ensure employees, partners, and supply chain and other stakeholders work in a safe and secure environment and go home safe every day. And the second one, all my workplaces have actively targeted improving health and safety and promoting a healthy culture. Throughout my career, training and experience has made health and safety a daily and integral part of the work I do and plan. So we'll run through this, and then maybe I'll speak about using examples at the end. So you may think this competency does lend itself to people out on site and out in the field. If you're in the middle of a huge construction project, health and safety is paramount everywhere, but no more so than in the middle of a huge construction area. But lots of people will be office based, so don't feel it's so you can write about being based in an office and the risks that are there. And like it says here, there are risks. And I said there were lots of people in offices. So if we just take it that people will be returning to offices, but there are lots of people in an office. So the likelihood of an accident happening within an office are maybe higher, less risk, or less riskier outcome, but there are risks in office and there are lots of people, so there's lots of chances of accidents happening. Your offices will have risk assessments and procedures in place. If you go to Thames Water site, if I can just talk about that. First of all, there is a policy to get into the building normally. There's normally walkways, so people have to walk in particular places. Every site is a reverse park. You have to reverse park everywhere, and this is for safety reasons. So just in entering just parking your car and entering a building has health and safety policy based around it. As I said, offices have visitors. So when people come to your site, you normally have to explain your site policy. So that's a health and safety thing you probably do when people come and visit you on even in your office. You have to explain what your health and safety policy is, and what the risks on site, whether there's a fire alarm, and things like that. So there are things to talk about. There are also office-based roles that you can take up or play a part in that help promote yourself in this competency. So just a few here. Lots of companies have health and safety champions and representatives, especially in more remote offices. Obviously, if you're a fire warden, you will have been on fire training and will regularly do inspections that are part of health and safety. And if you're a first aider as well, it lends itself to helping to give evidence for this competency. And a small example at the bottom, within the office, I've just changed this a little bit. We, or I have, am a representative taking the lead on office health and safety. Issues depend on their importance or are dealt with immediately or discussed during monthly office meetings. I, as a member of the office, have a responsibility to adhere to the office health and safety issues such as trip hazards and fire drills, ensuring that I read up regularly on company policies relating to health and safety. So I think that's quite a good example, just explaining how things go in an office and their responsibilities to themselves, and also how they keep themselves updated. So as I said, if you work on site or do field work, this obviously does lend itself a little bit to that, but it shouldn't only be about that, but it's a chance to put in some good examples of this. So obviously if you do field work, you're out on the roads or side of the roads, you can explain how you go about that. Obviously if you're based on a site, a construction site, or a sewage treatment works or a water treatment works, or you go to those or visit those, you can explain about that. Obviously, part of that would be method statements of work you're doing and risk assessments, looking at the risks and the impact of the risks. Put a little thing in there about dynamic risk assessments. When I say that, it's about the changing nature of, you might go to a place every day, but when it snows, suddenly it's slippery underfoot and the risks are different. Suddenly you can go to a site and there's lots more people on site, and then suddenly the risks change. So that's just taking in the day-to-day changes that happen. And sometimes you could just say, well, it's raining, and the risks change as soon as it starts raining. Roads are slippier, leaves are falling on the ground, things like that. So it's just something to think about. Obviously, driving, it's one of probably the riskiest thing lots of companies do, with having had so many people driving around so many miles. But there are health and safety, your company will have a health and safety legislation about that. Things like mobile phones, how long you should drive, taking rests. So you can throw that in if it's part of your job. PPE, I think it's probably useful to explain a little bit about personal protective equipment if you use it on a day-to-day basis. If you're office-based, probably not, but obviously it's an important part of health and safety, so it can be used somewhere in your example if need be. And you will or could have been on specific health and safety training. So I've thrown a couple of examples in. Signing, lighting and guarding, that's new roads and street works, that's working in the road. Confined spaces training, if you need to take that. it's quite interesting what a confined space is. It can quite easily just be a walking into a smaller room on a site can be classed as a confined space. And if you're in the water industry, as an example here is the National Water Hygiene Card, which is a blue card, which is some training that you will have to do to enter a clean water site. So yeah, I've put in these recent, I wouldn't say changes, but different thinking about health and safety. So I've put at the top, change in thinking about health and safety. It used to be that health and safety was a bit of a secondary thing. Obviously, it was important, but now it's really is top of the agenda. At Thames Water, it's the first thing we talk about on any agenda. It probably used to be a bit of a throw-in at the end of a meeting, but now it's top of the agenda. And as I said, it's just how important health and safety is from where it used to be to where it is now. So I think that's a kind of clear distinction about how that's changed. Lots of people, lots of companies, obviously, mental health is now a much wider spoken about issue, and companies do have mental health first aiders and probably have changed their health and safety policy to include mental health a lot more. So that's something to think about. Companies also have wellbeing champions, such as like having wellbeing weeks to encourage colleagues to build up physical activity, and it's maybe even more important now with people based at home that they look after their mental health and get outside and do some physical activity that can help with physical and mental health. I've put COVID-19 in here. I wouldn't make it a very large part of your answer to this competency, but obviously it's just more things to think about where health and safety impacts your life. So working from home, I do exactly all the same, do very similar things that I do in the office where I have a health and safety policy, but now I'm just doing them at home. So something to think about, and obviously an example of that is display screen equipment assessment. So I'm now sat at my dining room table, and quite regularly I have to do one of these to check that my computer setup is valid and looking after my health. So, as I said at the start, this competency, it does lay out specific questions, and I think it's a very good idea to answer them in this. So, in your response to this, I think you should hit what is a near miss and how do you record it, somewhere in it. How do you keep up to date with health and safety in your environment, in your company? How do you deal with an unsafe act? So you should hit, I think you should hit all these pointers. And also, it talks about CDM, which I think is construction and design management, which if you work for, well, it explains it here, virtually everyone involved in a construction project has legal duties under CDM. And then it explains designers can be architects, consulting engineers, there'll probably be a lot of on the call, quantity surveyors, or anyone who specifies or alters designs as part of their work. So you might not call yourself a designer, but you might do design work, and therefore you need to know about CDM and the regulations. And here's an example from an answer to this. I'm aware of construction design management regulations that came into force in 2017 and were revised and replaced in 2015. As a designer, my responsibilities are to eliminate and reduce or control risks during design and to provide information to others to help fulfill their duty. So I think that's quite a concise example that answers that little bit that I am a designer and I do know about CDM. So activities for today and this week, discuss with your peers what health and safety legislation is relevant to you, what are your responsibilities for you or to you and for others. Take a look at your health and safety within your company. So take a look at the policy, whether it's on site or within an office, and any recent changes. Like we were talking about that health and safety is like the priority now, and obviously there's the mental health aspect changes to policy that's probably been introduced in the last couple of years. And yeah, as I said, look at the specific questions or specific points in this competency. It does lay it out quite nicely for you. Like if we just shoot back to this, you are expected to demonstrate. That's what it says. Try. You are expected to demonstrate there are clear processes in place. So you need to lay out what these processes are. So go and find those. Looking at cross-referencing the other professional regulations for engineering, it's E2, manage and apply safe systems of work. For chartered scientists, it's B2, promote and implementation robust policies and procurement protocols related to health, safety and security. And environment, identify areas of uncertainty and risk, including health and safety, environmental, technical, business and reputation. So all fairly similar. Just tips when writing your competency, always write in the first person. Write about what you've done and not what your team's done. There is a bit of company policy in this, so there will be a little bit of my company does this, but you need to write about what you do and how you would record incidents and near misses and things like that. Be honest in your response. Understand why you're doing it. Part of this is yeah, I think that it starts with understanding health and safety and also promotion of health and safety. So 2 things to hit on. Be concise. I think this is a competence you can be quite concise on. You don't need to go into deep explanation about what a near miss is or what certain risks are. You could probably quite easily do this in 5 or 6 short sentences or paragraphs. Remember what you've written and don't limit yourself to experience at your current employer or paid employment. So yeah, you might have seen this before. There is a fast track to membership course available through CIWEM. This is a paid course. So if you're very serious about getting your chartership done and want some help, there is a full-day course that you can do and speak to people within CIWEM and mentors that will help you tune your competencies and help with preparation for your interview. There is a mentor platform as well on CIWEM. So if you are looking for a mentor or want to be a mentor, you can register here and find out about how you can do that. So that's it for this week. We'll go to the Q&A. So yeah, next week it is C3 with Katie, and it's about sustainability. So we've got a couple of questions here. Is it a good idea to attach examples of RAMs, policy documents, images for good practice, etc.? Can images or drawings be used to save word count? If either of the other 2 guys want to jump in, they can help me here. I think you can attach pictures and documents or images, and yeah, if they lend themselves to entering this competency, yes, do that. Yeah, I think, Jack?
Sorry, yeah, I'd say you can attach documents, but I wouldn't recommend a lengthy policy document or risk assessment method statement unless it really adds to it. Certainly, if it's something that you've developed and you've delivered yourself, then go for it. But if it's a generic company policy or generic risk assessment, then I don't think that would add much to your application. It's more about how you've used those and your knowledge of them.
So yeah, if it's a specific thing that, as Jack says, you've done, do it. But yeah, just don't regurgitate policy documents or company documents.
I think with most other competencies, you're just identifying what you have done. So if it's enough to say that I've worked on this project and undertaken this piece of work, you don't have to attach the evidence for it. So if you say you've prepared a risk assessment method statement for this piece of work or this task, we don't need to see the evidence of that. The sort of the testing of that will be in the professional review.
Would you recommend that this competency is built differently from the previous 2 example structure? I feel you recommended more to follow the questions than maybe 1. Yeah, you can answer it how you like. I think this is quite clearly laid out. I think for my response, I probably had about 5 paragraphs coming to about 300 words, saying health and safety at work tech. Here's an example of a project where I did risk and method statements and worked on site. This is what we do in an office. Here's something. Here's a paragraph about CDM. So yeah, I would say if you've got 2 really good examples, do that. But there are a few things to hit within this competency that can be done within a sentence. Okay.
And just to pick up on the other question, if you are looking for previous week's webinars, they are on the CIWEM website under events. You should find recordings are posted within a sort of a day or so. Thanks to Jane at CIWEM HQ for organising that.
So we've got a couple of minutes. So if there's
also with the joining instructions for next week's webinar, they will be sent out the day before the webinar commences. Just to let you know. So if you've signed up for the remaining of the series, then you won't get the joining instructions until the day before the webinar.
There's another question come in. I would like to apply for chartered environment, but do not have a master's qualification. What would the expected equivalent professional experience be? Question mark years.
So with chartered environmentalists, chartered water environmental manager, chartered scientists and chartered engineers, I believe they've taken away the requirement for a minimum years of experience. It's more about the quality than necessarily the quantity. But traditionally, we've always talked about around the 5-year mark in your careers, where you probably have the sort of the level of experience and the competence across the board of the 14 competencies to apply for CIWEM. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't start looking at sort of year 2, 3, and 4 to plan that journey to make sure you hit that point. And it's not that you don't need a master's qualification for this. If you've got a bachelor's degree, then the sort of and you've gone into industry, 4 or 5 years experience is probably the point at which most people look at feeling they've got that competence across the 14 areas. If you do not have any degree, so if you come in as a sort of a technician off the back of GCSEs or A levels or any other qualification, there are alternative routes to membership for some of the qualifications where you can still demonstrate those levels of competence, but you might take you a little bit longer to get there. It's just sort of to get the equivalent experience. So you might be looking at 7 to 10 years if you've not undertaken a degree. But there's no, as I understand it, hard and fast rules about the numbers of years you have to have served. Some people, after 3.5 years, will have had quite diverse experience, covered all of these areas, feel that they're very competent in them. Some people after 10 or 15 may still feel that they've got areas that they need to develop. So there's no minimum, no maximum.
Okay, and someone else asked a similar question. Is it fine to use more than two examples for this competency to hit the different points you've made, e.g. CDM office site examples, even if there is a less detail? I think there is. Just going back, I think it's asked you fairly specific things to explain, and you'll need to explain those, and there are 5 or 6 points. So you can make a sentence or a paragraph about each. But you don't need to, as Jack was saying, you don't need to go into deep detail about what the risks on your project were. You can just say it was a construction site, or I was in the road, that sort of thing. And we had method statements and risk assessments to meet the requirements. So yes, you can use more than 2 examples on this one.
And I think just as I say, make sure you talk about how it's relevant to you or your contribution to that. So your understanding of CDM, how you've applied it on a project, your contribution to the office risk assessment, and how you understand it and implement it, how you communicate it, like Iain said, to your guests and visitors. It's more than just saying my company has a policy. I understand that this act exists. It's about how you use those and how it influences your work.
Yeah. So use I and not we.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's just gone past 9 o'clock. Got no more questions. So we're going to wrap it up there. So thank you for everyone who's attended, and we'll see you next week.